I feel like I had to do something more complicated last time to get this to go live. Maybe it's because I'm late. There we go. That's what I'm looking for. There's the button. The button says go live. All right. Hey, everybody. So, I don't know if the other part of it came through before, but I'm going to be joined in a little bit by one of the Phalcon community core members, and we're going to see what we get done today. So, where we left off last time, the application was able to... we handled our assets, we handled our migrations, we have a page that lets us load in a specific, or create a new user. So we're going to give a once over to some of that stuff. So the thing I tried to do was create what I'd consider Rails-like RESTful services. And I think that went over pretty well. I mean, obviously I saw some and got some feedback regarding the fact that it doesn't really matter in Phalcon if it's a get or a post how the router works, unless I was to explicitly set up router settings to get to have this make any sense. So I, for example, our create action, which receives the post from our new action, probably should be wrapped in a is post helper function to make sure that I can't arbitrarily get and somehow set something, which of course I can't because this requires the post object to be present, and so I wouldn't have a post object without actually a post verb. So it's probably going to be okay in that sense, but it's just something that I've been thinking through and we've been working out. So I created the show action, which I then started thinking about might be better utilized as an index action. Just from a URL construction standpoint. So let's take a look at the browser and see what this looks like. Oh, hey, YouTube window. Go ahead and close this down. All right. Oh, that's right. I got this running right on 80 for convenience. Let's bring the terminal up just to make sure we're getting any errors or anything like that. And this is, so let's get our terminal loaded. All right, so let's go ahead and start tailing our application logs. This is all running through MAMP just because I was super lazy about installing my own Apache server and all that stuff. I know that's easy with Homebrew on my Mac, but I just didn't want to deal with it. All right, so tail-f logs PHP error log. Helps if you actually put the hyphen in. Okay, so let's go ahead and reload this page and just make sure everything seems cool. Right, those are just messages, it looks like, from the Apache startup or something that happened at the end of the day yesterday. So we're dealing with user authentication and user management. And let's see here. I'm going to send a quick link out. Okay, so the benefit here is we should be able to go to our user route and construct a new user, and then hopefully, if I go to PHP myadmin, we should be able to see that user that I created. So bear with me, I don't normally use PHP myadmin, and it's because I've changed the root password. We're going to go ahead and probably use MySQL Workbench, because that is at least a tool that I am highly familiar with. And it already connects to my local instance of MySQL. So go ahead and add a new window for that. Okay, so let's take a look at our users table. If you remember last time we set up Finks, so we have our Finks log in here as well, which in our case is just keeping track of the single migration we made, which was to create the users table. All right, let's do a little cleanup. A few too many tabs open. All right, so we created two users. I have Paul at paul.paul and Paul at not paul.paul, but both of them were successful. We also added form validation to get this looking right. So let's go back to that user form. And let's just kind of get our head together and maybe make a login form, which would be nice. Or in our case, just get some of the information we've placed in here so that we can contextually use it. I would like to provide the authentication hooks for our login process, though. That would be pretty cool. Okay. Let's see, I just got a bing. Oh. All right. OBS management time, powers activate. Form of click the up down button a bunch. Hi, I'm gonna join you in, and then you can introduce yourself. How's that sound? Good. So I have here with me one of the Phalcon core members. If you want to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Nikolaos, the long name, or Nikos Dimopoulos. I'm one of the core members of the Phalcon team. I've been involved with the project since version 0.4 back. And I started initially doing documentation because I have no idea about how C works. And lo and behold, coming towards me more and more, and social media, and evangelize Phalcon. And with the latest restructure that we did at the beginning of the year, I'm pretty much the one that handles all the documentation right now, tries to evangelize as much as possible, and social media, monitors all of our feeds, and trying to help with other areas. Sadly, that doesn't leave that much time to start working on new applications to things with Phalcon, but hey, I'm not complaining.
Well, yeah, and you've been an enormous amount of help, as I think I posted some video where I was like just trying to get my bearings, and posted it to the Phalcon social media, and you've been talking to me ever since. And so in the other videos, there's a lot of points where I'm kind of like talking to a second person who's not actually there, and that's been Nikolaos, who's
That's me.
Yeah, politely chatting, dealing with a 20 to 30-second delay. Usually answering my question after I've speculated about what the right answer is, and then giving me the same answer, but then confirming that that was the right way to think about it, which has been a lot of fun, to be honest. But I figured that, removing that half-minute delay might be more fun for everybody else, too.
Absolutely, yeah.
So, where I was going to jump back into here is I was just going to run through the user form that we created last time, and then make sure the validation messages work correctly, and then I want to start retrieving that data from the database so that I can create like an action before hook for the authentication portion.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the authentication was Frankenstein from the Volcure, I think, project.
Yeah.
And
The auth class.
yeah, and I really liked the way that was organized. And my first thought was, boy, this would be the perfect library to just be the authentication library. Because I think the first thing I did was just look for a Phalcon authentication library, and I saw some things in Packagist, but nothing that looked that wasn't just an open source project, right? Like not one that people are really using. But that one seems like that would be the perfect candidate for it.
Yeah, absolutely. And Phalcon, one of its greatest strengths and weaknesses, as we all know, is that it's loosely coupled, so it doesn't bind you into using a specific set of tools. If you want to change your authentication, by all means, you can do that. You can implement your own class. What we do try to offer is some samples to get you started, and then from then on, you just do exactly what you want to do according to the needs of your application. I know for sure that there is an auth 2 implementation in Phalcon. I played with it a little bit some time ago, but I never got to work with it or even bring it into the Phalcon incubator because, frankly, I didn't have an OAuth server to authenticate, and I was too lazy to install one myself.
So, as a side note, since I've done a lot of OAuth stuff in the past, my testing server usually becomes GitHub. It becomes trivially easy to set up to create a OAuth token within the GitHub, and then just use it for regular, like scope that out to just give you access to your email address, so you can deal with the identity portion correctly. And so I think 90% of what I learned about OAuth happened as a result of the fact that GitHub made it so easy for me to register a new client. And I think go ahead.
Yeah, well, I don't know if you noticed it, but our forums actually work with that. So
yes.
You log in using your GitHub. And so we do have the implementation there for the OAuth of GitHub to authenticate yourself. And it is open sourced. You can go and have a look at the code. So that's another option that people can use for their authentication purposes.
Yeah, that's actually a good idea. I had forgotten that used the GitHub authentication. So one criticism that I'm probably going to open a PR for is that I wish it remembered me. I had a funny situation where I walked away from my computer for too long, and I was in the middle of typing a post, and had logged me out. Did that thing where it like gave me an error message instead of staving my message, and asking me to log back
in. Sadly, I've been through that too myself, and I always keep on saying, "Well, we need to remember me here," and then time passes, and you never sit down to actually do the remember me function.
Well, I really like your forum, so I'm probably going to end up implementing that at some point, because I find those kind of like little things, they're easy to fix, right? And it's only removing people's frustrations, which means they're more likely to contribute. All right.
True.
So all these validations still work, and they're wonderful, and I'm sure it'd be better if they were a little bit more robust.
I have quite a bit of an aggressive plan towards giving things a new gizmos and tools, and look shiny. And we're trying as much as possible to better. Because the incubator, for those that don't know about it, is a repository that does have the Phalcon namespace. You can install it using Composer. Stations from our community that are in pure PHP. Initially, I'll give you an example. The soft delete behavior that people know in their databases. So instead of actually deleting a record, you set a flag to 1 or 0.
Okay.
There is another behavior called Blameable. And sorry about the cat; she just decided to come over and meow right next to me. Hey, I'm on holidays allegedly.
Allegedly.
Yeah, I know. So the blameable behavior is when you want to keep an audit trail of what has been deleted, edited, and basically any database operation, and you store all those values, previous value and new value, into a different table, kind of like an audit table. So these two behaviors were initially written in the incubator as pure PHP code, and lo and behold, it actually made itself into the main framework. So whoever has ideas that would benefit the community, by all means, the incubator is there for pull requests.
Yeah, I've actually been really curious as to what the incubator actually is. Like,
it's the same namespace, Phalcon, but
yeah.
you install it with Composer.
So I don't need to have Zephyr, is the point.
No, you don't.
Okay. So I have to admit that one of the big attractors to Phalcon is Zephyr. Even that I even see that packages themselves would probably end up being distributed as something compiled through Zephyr. Because I don't really need to write my authentication and then change it, right? I feel like my authentication could be a Zephyr module and this just installed as an extension.
Yeah, and you could write it. The apart from very few instances, what you could do is, let's say you wrote an authentication module for fine, or because you were just playing around doing whatever. Then you can pretty much take that code, and with some simple conversions, you can make it into Zephyr code. And then all you have to do is just compile it, load it up as a module, and then run your tests against it.
I am looking forward to the world of a Zephyr transpilation option.
We're not there yet.
I know. I'm saying I'm looking forward to it. That would be pretty awesome.
Uh-huh. The thing that would be extremely awesome, and we did try the godfather or the father of Phalcon, Andres Gutierrez, who's in Colombia right now. He's taking a little bit of a sabbatical, just because he's pretty much burned out, the poor guy. Over these last few years. At times, he was just the only one maintaining the project. It was just him and me, and of course, I was of no use because I don't know C. But yeah, I mean, truth be told, okay. So what he did is he leveraged a couple of tools on the internet. I really don't remember their names, but he created a just-in-time compiler. So you would pretty much hook up Sublime. Okay, sorry for the big noises upstairs. My daughter is playing.
No worries. No worries. I got 3 dogs in a room. We're lucky they're not barking.
All right, okay. So pretty much what he would do is he would have Sublime Text on. He would just save a file, and then he would have a hook that would fire up the just-in-time compiler, compile this Zephyr file that you just changed into PHP, reload the module on, and then you would see it straight up on the browser.
That's very cool.
So that work initially has been done, but of course there's quite a few bugs in there. We haven't touched it for quite a while. We're more interested in releasing 3 and making sure that we have stability, because version 3 is our first LTS version. We are going to be supporting it for quite a few years.
That's pretty cool.
Whatever we give out, is ready for the masses to use and know that, yeah, I'm going to have support until so on and so forth.
I think that, I mean, I always see things like those extra tools. Like if I go back to the JavaScript world, right? That's the Babel project, right? That was done by somebody else, right? I see that as an opportunity for someone who's interested in both this thing and Zephyr to take a stab at that. I don't really think that that's necessarily something that's going to come out of the core team or is expected to. There's always that risk in a project of having too much separation and focus.
Yep. Absolutely. The thing is that, in my view, everybody has good ideas, and everybody has bad ideas. Whether people are gonna follow your idea or not, it's up to them whether the quality of your product is good or not. Of course, in the open source community, uh, a lot of users don't realize that this is an open source community. I'm doing this in my own free time because I just like it, not because I get paid for it, or, the payment in the open source community is probably a thank you. That's
Right.
that's the most common payment that you get because you actually help somebody, Paul, John, whoever. Um, but building something, it's not difficult. Convincing people that what you build is noteworthy and people should use it, and that's great. And once you get to that point, and once you get to this where you have, let's say, 500, 1,000 stars on GitHub, or you get some traction, starts because certain people think that with their own ideas and their own experiences, they should change the project according to what A, their needs are, or B, what they're being used to. And we had this numerous times in Phalcon, and I've always been the bad guy to just say no. We had people telling us that we need to follow Laravel's approach, and we need to change everything. And our joke was, okay, we're gonna take Laravel as is, and then we're gonna convert everything into Zephyr, and then rebrand it to Laravel, whatever. So put PH in front of Laravel. And then somebody else was saying, well, you don't have active record, you have data mapper. Active record is better than data mapper.
Yeah.
And it's endless discussions there. I mean, truth be told, in version 4, we are looking into offering active record as well.
Why not? I mean, like, if it's just an adapter, it's just another beautiful option.
But it's always the case that if you're trying to build something, try to build it with your heart and soul and offer it to the community. They will like it. But then my suggestion is always try to be true to the guidance and the direction of what your project was according to what you thought. This reminds me of Guido von Rossum, the benevolent dictator of Python. I mean, if you think about it, if he says no, that's no. There's no discussion about it. And
right.
In the past, he pretty much told really big names in the open source community no, and they got pissed off and they left. So he said, okay, goodbye. Where I'm getting with that is that people try to do something what Zephyr is trying to do in JavaScript or in other languages. Just try to speed up things, bundle things, obfuscate things, or whatever. By all means, go for it, but always be true to what the direction of that project should be, not change just because the winds change.
Well, I definitely remember there was a story I was told. I was attending a conference, and someone was talking about he had come up with a thing. He wanted to launch it as kind of a framework, and this guy in the audience said, "Do you really want to do that? Because you realize that now you'll be that guy, the guy who made that thing, and you'll spend the rest of your life defending that thing from people who want to change it. Like, you're gonna have to be that guy who just says no." And it's the right decision, right? Like, it's not saying no because you're a jerk. It's saying no because you have to say, this is this, and that is something else. And if you want to go build that, that's great. And we'll try to make it work together, but we're not going to change this. And you just have to get used to that. But that's like you live long enough to see yourself become the villain, right?
Absolutely.
And so people who are new to frameworks and new to development, I don't think they always see that relationship happening. They just know that I'm using this thing means a lot to me, I need to do something else, but I don't have the development time or the knowledge, I need you to do it. It's selfish, and you're right about the thank you. Because really, all that really should have been is, thanks for building this. and maybe you'll build this other thing or maybe not, but thanks.
The example that I can give you is back in the 0.5, 0.6 days, where we had support for databases was SQLite, MySQL, and Postgres. We kept on getting this one guy that kept on saying, well, what about Mongo? Come on, guys, what about Mongo? Please do this, please do this. So we spent a whole cycle building the ODM for Mongo. We released it, and he didn't even use it. Of course, later on, a lot of people said, "Oh, hold on a sec. You got support for Mongo. That's great. I can use it for my own project." So it wasn't wasted effort, but maybe it was a wasted time spent at that particular moment where we could have put our resources to something else. And yeah, of course, Mongo would come in later, by all means. So yeah, it is difficult to say no to people. I mean, especially when your project starts growing slowly. But if you don't, then you're setting yourself up to all sorts of problems.
I think it's an enormous challenge, and it's interesting that you did try to react to that need, and then he didn't use it. And that's, I think, kind of the reason why when things are community driven like that, you can tell right away. Like someone puts in an issue request, or someone. I think I like your process of if you have something you want to talk about, take it over to the forum. Don't create a GitHub issue about it and clog that up. And then you can really tell the hotness of something by how many people are really interested in it over in the forum. And that kind of gives you maybe a better direction. Whereas you're not... GitHub's too close to the code, right? So someone starts talking to you there, and you're in that mind space. Well, I got a code here. And so I really think that's a good separation. I don't know if you modeled that from somebody else, from some other...
To be quite frank with you, I don't remember. It's been such a long time. So I don't know if somebody else did it. If they did it, kudos to them. Outside right now, anybody. It has worked definitely for us, and we're very, very vigilant if we see the wrong issue being put into the wrong repository or something. We just pretty much close the issue and just put a note. If you want help with this, just ask the forum or use our Discord server just to ask the quick question. And that pretty much splits things up. All the issues are the issues, and so on and so forth.
Absolutely. I think it's brilliant in that sense, though. I think that obvious separation of mental state means a lot to making sure that... it's almost like this. There's a little bit of time cost to go over to the forum and write it up and respond to it. It's not as easy. And that means if something wasn't really anything more than an ephemeral to begin with, it'll just get lost at that point. And probably for good reason, because there wasn't a commitment behind it in the first place.
Yep.
I think in open source, since I always try to do meetups a lot, the thing I'm always trying to foster is some kind of commitment from another person to also be involved in the meetup. Otherwise, what they turn into is this cult of Paul, where everyone will go to the meetup and they'll listen to me speak every week, and I will politely ask them, to submit something, and I'll try to coach people, but and then but there's a problem. So if that goes on too long, right, then there's just one person. The second person doesn't feel they can live up to be the half and half, and it's really hard. So it's something you have to cultivate it. And you guys have a good attitude in general, both in the forum and in Discord. So, well, I think you're a little quiet in Discord these days. Everyone seems to be working too hard.
I'm not sure if it has to do with Discord itself, or it has to do with a lot of people are on holidays or they're not. We did receive quite a bit of criticism that we left the holy grail of development, meaning Slack.
Yeah.
The reason we left Slack and we went to Discord was because unless you pay
Mm-hmm.
for Slack, you're gonna see more than 10,000 messages. That's throughout the whole. So you have feeds coming into your Slack channels, you have discussions, and then all of a sudden you have a discussion how you should proceed in bootstrapping the application. This is one of the things that we're working on right now. Skeleton projects according to what people need. So a single module, micro application, multi-module, and so on and so forth. So all that discussion, half of the messages were gone by the time I woke up. Most of my colleagues are in the what I call the Eastern Bloc. So we have Russia, Ukraine. A lot of them are in Europe, and then by the time you come to the U.S., where I live, hours behind. Well, there you go. There's your 10,000 messages. Whatever was said before that, you missed it.
Right.
So that was the primary reason that we went there. And another thing that I do love about Discord is that it has a really, really cool roles model. 9 different groups, certain roles, and they can see or reply or do whatever with different channels. So unless you're somebody like us that has access to everything, your channel list will be tailor-made to whatever you need. So that makes it a little bit easier for us. Now, some people just say, you know, I don't like it. Discord is just for gamers.
Nah.
Okay, fine. You know, if you don't like it, we're not gonna force you to be there, but we're gonna be there if you like us. Bear in mind, we do still go back and check Slack just in case people, you know. But at some point, Slack is gonna die down completely.
And of course, for me, I missed the whole Slack thing altogether. And I was actually kind of pleased when you said you were over at Discord, because if I were to share my Slack window right now, because it's the holy grail of developers, I'm in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm in 6 Slack channels. I can't take it. I physically can't take it. Actually, the reason I like Discord, we actually, when I started my second meetup, which was a Ruby, like, intro developer Ruby meetup, I partnered with a community college for it. We set up a Discord server for that one because it let us chat with each other when we weren't, like, at meetups. Like, just have a conversation. And I actually kind of think that might work out well in general. You know, as people are learning, that they could have a pairing room. So if only I could pair it with a way to screen share at the same time that was built into Discord, which I don't think there is, but I also haven't looked, so. All right, so I got a question.
Sure.
So I've figured out that for some reason, find by ID wasn't working as I expected. And
is your ID your primary key?
My ID is my primary key, yes.
Okay.
Well, I didn't mark it in any way special, but the migration created that as the primary key.
Okay.
So, like, I hadn't given any attributes here, and because I didn't see that as a thing. You know, that like a very Java thing is to attribute these with whatever they are. So I did.
You don't need to. The only for me, the only reason I would put attributes at the top with doc blocks, PHP Storm can actually type hint it, but you don't have to.
Well, that might be nice, though. The type hints are kind of convenient, whether you're using PHP Storm or not, though. So, I resorted to find first.
Okay.
Which it seems like find first, when I was looking at the documentation, but first is the ID. Maybe.
Yeah. Find first will actually give you, we'll use the primary key.
Mm-hmm.
What I usually do, and this is kind of like a little long way around, but I keep this format throughout the code, and it makes it a little bit easier to read. So what I do is, instead of having ID, I pass in an array. So
yeah,
you can just delete that and just open an array. The first element is conditions, and then the value of that element So delete the bracket.
Yeah. I realized what it did here.
Okay. The value of that is ID equals what is it? Semicolon, ID, again semicolon. So the 2 dots. Or is it a double colon?
You mean a colon?
No, not this. That one. All right, colon. All right. Sorry. Hey,
No,
I'm from Greece, so.
No, that's fine. I'm not familiar with this. So ID equals colon. That's like a, and then.
No, ID equals space.
Yeah.
Colon.
Oh, okay.
And then another colon.
So we're on both sides. So this is our.
If you don't put the second one.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you don't put the second one, you're gonna get a segfault.
Okay.
And that comes from PDO, not from Phalcon. And you can easily waste half a day just trying to find what is going on.
Now this is
from experience.
This is doing the parameter sanitation replacement part of PDO, right?
Correct.
Okay,
so
cool.
That's your first element. The second element in the array is the word bind.
Okay.
B-I-N-D.
Yeah.
And then the value of that would be another array. And then the first key is ID. Value is the $ID at the top that you got.
So this does seem like a pretty common. So you're still using find first at this point, or are you just doing find?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, if you're using find, you're gonna get a
collection,
an array that has one element.
Right. First.
Find first, you're gonna get one element. It depends on how you want to get your data. So the linkage here is the colon ID colon has to be the same as the element in the bind.
Absolutely.
So,
that totally makes sense. So the question I have though is, that makes sense that you actually have to identify both these things, but this seems like a pretty common criteria. So is this what when I do users? Wow, I think I never did this before. Find by property. Is that kind of what it's doing?
Yeah, that's pretty much what it's doing in the back end.
So it's funny when
it's kind of like a magic method.
When I did this with when I did this with ID, I returned null from my database. When I did it with find first and just gave it the ID, I only seem to get the first record no matter what. So I was just
if you're doing find first, you're always going to be getting one record.
Right, but I seem to not be getting the right record. So I was going to go check my MySQL database and make sure that it's just not a nuance of the fact that I have to name myself the same every time. Because I didn't think I did, but, you know. So a couple of these, we'll make this one. We'll change the name of this one. So I have IDs 1, 2, and 3 I can reference, and then I overtook the index function to pass it this ID instead, because I like the way that this URL looks better. All right, so you're not happy with that at all, are you? Did I miss anything? Let's go ahead and rewrite this, because this makes me sad. Nope, I don't like that either.
Oh, and something else. Another thing that I usually do is the users find first. I assign it in an object or a variable, and then I pass the variable in the view. And there's a lot of reasons for that.
There's a PHP like language parsing thing about it too, right? Like normal
not necessarily.
Variable patterns.
I want to make sure that I can check that variable if it's false. If it's false, that means that I got nothing.
Ah, well, that makes sense.
Then I can have a different path of my application to just do something that the view will understand and not throw up or something. Because if you think about it, you're passing in your view a variable called user, right? And in your view, you could do user.name. Well, what happens if that particular variable is null or false? You cannot get a .name from a false. So what you could do is you can send an STD object or whatever and avoid checking those variables in your view. It's
Okay.
a matter of preference, how you want to do it. I just do it this way. So.
Well, I was just gonna see like if I did localhost users and then put the parameters as script tag, what would it do?
Yeah, I know, right?
He got real upset with that actually.
Yep.
And went back to a different page.
The one thing that the reason I use this particular format is you can actually put more stuff in there. So you can use order, you can use where. So it allows you to very quickly add more to that array and change whatever you need.
And this is definitely where I'm going to talk about Laravel Eloquent. So there is a lot of what I'd call like fancy helper methods, which I'm more familiar with from a Rails standpoint, with Active Record being built up as well as it has been over the years, where I'm used to saying user.where.order. You know, like I have functions that wrap and then build these constraints up. But there is something about just breaking those constraints into part of an array, which is, you know, functions cost resources in PHP, whereas arrays are almost like free. Yeah. So, you know, like converting this structure, which is not hard to read, into a thing that's appropriate for the language. So that's like where my light criticism of Eloquent comes in. Is they definitely try to make it programmer friendly, but they didn't make it language appropriate.
Yep.
And I always try to explain to people, like, the whole parser structure of PHP ends up being just this giant associative array somewhere getting interpreted. Like, it's free. Just take advantage of arrays everywhere. If you can write them correctly, if they don't look like a fool while doing it. Okay, so I've done find first. The condition is I've matched this ID. My view is returning nothing.
As far as what's your ID? Put a couple of var dumps in there.
Yeah, that's where I was starting with, and it's definitely going to be easier to die var dump at this point. Now that I have a variable.
Actually, you do have Composer in there, don't you?
Yeah, I could install something, and I have xdebug, but I just don't feel like running the debugger. So this returned a false.
All right, so you didn't find it.
Right.
You didn't find the record.
Okay, so can I get a SQL representation of what this was going to produce before it went to PDO?
Yes. You'll have to interact with the...
It's not like ToSQL.
Manager.
Sure.
No. That doesn't happen.
Yes.
What you're going to get is you're going to get PHQL, which is pretty much very close to SQL. So the difference is that instead of looking select star from users, you're going to see select star from your model users.
Right.
All right. That's the big difference of PHQL.
Well, here's my thing. When I did this as find first and just gave it the ID, I did return a value. So let's just fork this off and just compare the two. Just for a sanity check. Linter is unhappy with something. All right, so I'm var dumping, so I actually receive a user object, and so I'll get rid of the var dump here, and I should see a name on the page, and I can quickly see if I'm getting the right stuff. So the side effect here is it doesn't matter which ID I pass. I get the same user returned to me, the first user. So it doesn't seem to respect the property as having anything to do with the ID. For example, like find first is ignoring, and this could be a configuration issue.
It will find your first record.
Yeah, exactly, and that's all it's doing. It's finding my first record. Yeah. So it doesn't seem to care about this argument if it's scalar.
I'm curious though why the previous one did not work.
Yeah, it is odd. Right, I agree. So that's why I just wanted to sanity check that the thing I had seen was I was doing this and only getting the first record no matter what. Okay, so that's not right.
You know, for argument's sake, just for my
Mm-hmm.
entertainment, if you like, can you go around line 11 and just put a ID equals and something, an unknown ID that you have above the me? Put a number there.
Yeah,
See
sure.
if that one would bring.
So that did work.
That did work.
It did work, and it gave me the right record. So the people viewing at home will see that the browser has. I think they'll see at home. OBS, you make me sad. But yes, that is working. So back to the code. It's funny because I guess maybe
somehow the ID is not being passed properly, and actually, it might be a good idea to sanitize that the minute we get it.
Okay.
So you can either remove the ID from the index action,
okay,
completely, or you can cast the index action as it comes in.
Well, let's do the I would say the traditional way, where I'd probably try to capture the ID from the get object, right?
Yeah. Well, you're not going to do that.
No. Oh, okay.
No.
So go ahead and show me what you're talking about.
Right. So first of all, what is our variable called in let me reverse that. You're talking about /users/index/1.
So because I'm doing index, it's just /users/some number.
Okay. In that case, just put the $ID as you had it in the index action.
Okay.
And then below it, you can sanitize it using Phalcon filter or anything you like. You can even.
I have to look up the example of this Phalcon filter thing again.
/filter. Actually, you'll probably need to create it a filter object, unless you've already registered it in the DI.
I don't remember. No.
All right, so let's quickly register it in the DI. So around there, just put Phalcon /filter. Fine, and then let's say copy these guys, and then we'll change the name.
And we'll just say.
So filter, and then filter, and then filter.
Oh, come on, multi-cursor. Make my life harder. Okay.
All right, so now in your controller, what you can do is, so ID equals this, filter.
Is it filter? Or yeah, that's right, because it's already in this scope.
Yep. And then a little arrow, sanitize with the object. Yep, sanitize. And then you put the ID and then comma. And here's the interesting thing: you can use a string, or you can use a constant. They both do the same thing. So you could use the string int, so absolute integer.
Right.
Or you can use filter : filter _ADS int. If you like using constants.
I do like using constants, but these are internal language constants. I don't think they're. I'm not going to redefine them.
No, you're not redefining them. What I was going to say is that you can either use this approach or that approach, whichever you like.
Well, no, my point is that
result,
yeah, constants for me are if I want to distribute a possible, like large change through my application, then I love constants, but constants for the sake of constants. If I can't control them is the point. Like if there are language constraints that I'm not going to touch. Yeah, well, it still helps the find and seek, I guess, because then it's easier for me to.
and I get it. It's to each their own.
Well, let's do it. Let's do it that way. I've convinced myself that I want to be able to search for this stuff. Oh, hello, come back here. Phalcon. So it's Phalcon filter.
Phalcon/filter : the other slash.
Yep.
And then depending on what you want, it's filter_int capitals. Okay.
Oh, right. Yeah, the word to constant part.
Yep.
Yeah, when I want to look for filters, I can now search the entire application for filter underscore and find all my filter locations.
Yeah.
That's going to make my life easier. Okay, so I've sanitized ID. Now, if for some reason this failed sanitation, right, like I put A in there, am I going to return a false? Is it going to go null on me?
The underlying function is what is it? bar_filter, isn't it? So PHP has a function called, hold on a sec. I think it's called var. No, it's filter var. Filter_var.
Filter
right?
underscore
So that's
var.
var. So that one is pretty much the function that does all this.
Okay.
It's the underlying engine. So if memory serves right, if you send whatever, you're going to get it back as 0.
Okay.
On a number, on an integer.
I think that's on there. I'm trying to see if I can find it in GitHub just so we can look at it.
Yeah, so if you go to Phalcon/cphalcon,
I think I'm in the right place. Let's see. Let me just share this.
You can click the Phalcon and then click the filter.zip.
Yep, I'm right there. Okay. So where is function?
It should be in the sanitize function.
Yeah, okay. Well, I just notice that a lot of these were calling filter var somewhere. Yep. Okay.
That's pretty much the engine behind this component.
So I noticed, so these functions do not, I guess these don't return it. So I was getting to the understanding that Zephyr had, if you created a function, you had to provide the return type at the end of the function definition. But for example, sanitize does not.
You don't have to.
Okay.
You can, but you don't have to.
So that gets me much closer.
Strong typing, so.
Right. Well, I was reading about the strong typing portion, and I said to myself, well, that's good, but that takes a little bit more effort when I want to convert this from PHP to this language.
Mm-hmm. If you know that you're always going to be returning a string, there's no reason why you shouldn't.
Of course.
Put that. But if you have something like this, the sanitize function, which you really don't know what you're going to be getting, orders you pass, then you just leave it empty, and it will return mixed.
That's nice. So I'm wondering, so from the C standpoint, that has a lot. Well, I have to look at the engine at some point. Some point I'll get there. Someday I'll have free time to do that. You know, right?
Yes,
the mysterious someday. Okay, so that's cool. We've validated this. That means that ultimately, even if it doesn't pass the filter, we'll always get an integer, and that's not a big deal. So I like that. And I think I'm just gonna var dump.
Yeah, might as well.
The ID while I'm here, just to make sure it's coming. I'm pretty sure it's coming through, but hey, I don't want to. Alright, so let's go ahead and reload this page and see what we get. Alright, so I'm still coming back with nothing. Let me make sure I don't get any errors.
Can you move the var dump line 11 and die?
Yeah.
there.
I absolutely
And the
can.
reason I'm saying this is just to make sure that you do get the routes passing you the parameter.
So you want me to move this? What? Say that again.
One up.
Okay.
Yep. And actually, while you're at it, can you clone this line and var dump the $_get?
Oh yeah, sure.
Your get super global is correctly populated.
So I can tell you that when this was show action, it definitely was. But I recently changed it to index. I have to die this. Never mind. Okay, so we get null. ID is responding as null.
Okay.
And our get object contains URL, string, users, /3. So we should have suspected that 3 would have been.
So somehow your route does not transform.
Let's change this to show, because this is what it was originally.
Parameter.
And so this will become now users show 3. And see how, if at all, that makes a change. That makes an enormous change. So it looks like, by default, index routes do not accept parameters. Which, to some extent...
They actually do.
Oh.
But, it's a little bit of a weird thing, because the index is the index is the default controller, and index is the default action.
Right.
For any controller. So you could potentially omit it.
Yes.
And if you omit it, then the router has to know that it's no longer /user/index/3, it's /user/3.
Strangely enough, when I dropped index out, it then said index was not found as a handler. So it's not being defined implicitly.
Yep. So the you can definitely bypass this whole thing, or just fix it if you like, by playing around with routes. Right now, if memory serves right, you just use the default routes, which is module controller action parameters.
Yeah.
In order to play around with the index action, you will have to create specific routes that will either do redirections or allow it. But then again, you end up with this ugly /index in the URL, and you really don't want it.
Yeah, and actually I didn't want to put it on index initially. I was actually just doing that to try to produce the URL I wanted, which is I didn't want to have the action name.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. So now that you've run this, the second var dump, does the get show you? And sorry, I cannot see that screen of your browser. Does the second line of the when you var dump the $_get, does that give you just the URL as an element, or does it give you an ID?
So it, I'm gonna pull that up here in a minute, and because I just wanted to rename that partial for users show 3, and okay. So what I get back is something lovely like this. So I get the string. That's the parameter itself. Then the URL is not broken out as far as the get is concerned, but I am getting the correct parameter.
So you're getting the first parameter.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Playing with routes, you can actually name that parameter. So
that'd be awesome.
When you're dumping the get, you will not see string 1.3. You will see a string or whatever that you send it, but it will have a name. The array will have a name, and you can actually call it by name by looking at the request.
And that makes a lot of sense. So I got a question about the routing then. So in the Rails world, right, routing comes first, and that's kind of, we make our decisions about a lot of the application's interface based on the routes. Now, some of that is obviously because in the Rails world, there's no real concept of public-private. So you and there's nothing clever, I should put it this way, about a controller in Rails. Whereas this has definitely got some obvious cleverness, where it's figuring out what we want and it's using naming convention of the functions within. The cleverness in Rails is based on your controller is named controller, is pretty much all that matters. And this automatic routing makes a lot of sense to me, and because you have to affix action to the end of your function, that provides that kind of layer of protection that I can't just arbitrarily call any function I want from this class, from the URL.
Yep.
And I think that's kind of like, it's an interesting solution to the problem. I feel like, I don't know all the reasons why the Ruby team made the decisions they did. But I could definitely see that was part of one of their concerns. They wanted to be very explicit about, this is the way that you talk to the app. These are the only ways that you can make requests. And you're doing the same thing, but you're letting me configure that at the controller level, which is definitely a lot nicer. Of course, I'm giving up some control. I'm temporarily giving up some convenience to go along with what's considered the naming convention, which is cool. And if I do configure those routes, I'm assuming that I configure routes for a controller, and it doesn't have to be systemically changing anything else.
You configure routes for a module.
For a module.
Then a controller, and then actions and so on and so forth. Now, because this is a single module application, you forget the module itself. So you just do controller action and parameters. In applications that I've used in the past, either I would have to use the default one, which is module controller action parameters, or I would have to set up my own or set up additional ones. To give you an idea, you really don't want to show your users /session/register.
Right.
/register. So you can define a route like that will send it to the session controller and then register action.
Okay.
So you can do those shortcuts. If you do go down that route where you define your routes yourself, you will have to do then second is controller action, and then the third one is controller action parameters. All right. Or if you want to be very granular, you can create a route per controller if you want to do that. So in our case, you would have created a route that goes /users/ID:ID or something like that, and then you would name that parameter ID. Most people will not really need to do that because this would suffice.
Well, I guess my question then comes to it. So I'm working in an application at significant scale. So I'm a multi-module application, and is there some benefit, do you think, outside of just maybe vanity, what we always call it is URL vanity, to ever really avoiding this auto configuration for the routes? It's kind of like auto lookup.
It depends on a project that I worked that had multiple modules. We're talking about 10, 20 different modules. What we did was we didn't let the application do it for us. We were doing it ourselves. We were pretty much defining the routes. So we would take a list of all the modules, and we would look for the module that we called common. That was the module that was always available and all that stuff. And that module had the register, forget password, log in, log out, pretty much those functions that, irrespective of whether you're logged in or not, you do get them. You do get those endpoints. So that one was the first one that would get registered in the router, and then we would just loop through all the modules. Each module we would just register controller action parameters.
Okay.
And that would be it. It was a relatively quick and easy way of doing it, rather than just leaving PHP to leaving Phalcon to do the heavy lifting for us. And the reason we didn't want to do that, we didn't want to let Phalcon, is because we had numerous redirects from one module to another, and it was getting confused, because sometimes you would mistake and then all of a sudden you have a circular reference and then boom, goodbye.
Right.
So that gave us a little bit more control. Nothing stops you from just leaving the defaults as they are, and just letting it work the way it's supposed to.
I definitely see this as a benefit if you're learning the framework. Having to be, not even necessarily having to even know about the concept of a routing layer is excellent. And then being able to, even after you've built your application, kind of wire in routes after the fact. That goes along with the whole kind of like modular mentality of Phalcon in general, right? Where you kind of use the part you need, don't use the part you don't. And so I really like that. I just I found it very, it was almost just startling, because I'm so used to, when I started web stuff, I started in struts in Java, and so everything had to be defined in an XML file. And that was just ad nauseum horribleness. And then I move on to Rails, and Rails, okay, you still gotta make a routes file, but hey, it's actually pretty easy. And then you get to this, and they're just like, so just forget about it. Just don't sweat it. It's fine. I know that for my own comfort level, I would probably always end up, at least for things that I want URL vanity for, right? I would probably always end up writing the routes file myself, just because it's become this natural part of my behavior. But I definitely think if I'm setting someone else up, here, go build a thing, and I just follow the norms, it'll be fine. It's kind of like a built-in scaffolding that's free. Because I don't think the cost on this, the lifting that Phalcon's doing, it can't be a performance issue.
No, and the thing is, Phalcon is built for speed, compromising functionality. So what we're trying always to do is to, of course, increase performance by all means. We had a survey. I'm going off in a small tangent here. We had a survey a few months back, and we asked people, why do you like Phalcon? Why do you use it? Very simple questions. What do you want us to do more? And if you want to share with us your GitHub username, by all means. So by far the biggest, the largest portion of the survey that said performance. So and of course the biggest complaint was our documentation, which we are working on it, still working on it. But every day we're just trying to improve a little bit more.
I have to admit, and maybe I came in a little late on the documentation side, but your documentation is excellent in general.
You came late.
You
came a little bit late.
All right, fine, because I'm impressed with it.
Well, I'll give you the easiest example. It was not very new user friendly. So you would go into one area of the documentation. It will give you specific instructions on how to install Phalcon. Then you would go to the GitHub page. It would have different instructions. And then you go to another page. It would have different instructions. And it was really easy for somebody to get confused and give up and just say, you know what, I'm not doing this anymore. So that was working against the framework itself, getting a bad reputation, if you like. If I cannot install the damn thing, how am I going to be able to?
Yeah.
So we try to get everything together. The same thing being said in 20 different spots. It's exactly the same thing. You don't get a different idea. Now, granted, we have a lot of work to do still. There's certain functions that are not very well documented, certain components. This comes to mind. We could document that a lot more and give people the full power of said component and then from then on they can decide what they're doing. But first steps have been taken. We changed everything into Markdown. Then we're going to be enriching the documentation, and we're going to be introducing search, probably type as you go search, just to allow people to help to get the documents that they need.
So search is great. I have never once been able to trust the search engine on a documentation site. Ever. I've found it better to just go dig through the source code. And my perfect example of this is Vue.js, which I don't know if you've had a chance to look at that, but it had some very rapid changes in its life very quickly. And it became they like backfilled a JavaScript-y source or search engine onto that site, and it almost never gave you the results you were looking for, or it just told you it didn't exist. That was like
Awesome.
Done. I'm not doing it anymore. or my favorite is the Spring framework for Java, where you search for it in your current version, and it gives you one version backs as the results. You know, so I'd like Spring 5. Well, here's a 3.6 example, which is similar, but you're gonna have to go to Stack Overflow now afterwards. There is a version 5 documentation. It's just not in the search engine. Yeah, you spend a lot of time with URL hacking. In fact, there was a time when I think last week the documentation changed over significantly, and some of the old pages weren't redirecting. And Discord, everyone's like, fix the documentation, and I'm just going to URL hack the version I know that's in there, and then change the other file, change the file name, and find all the documentation I need. It was no big deal. I feel.
Yeah, we pretty much messed it up with the documentation. We didn't expect to have that many URLs broken.
You never do. You never do.
So, yeah, and we're still working. We do get a lot of 404s right now, and I know Sergey was working up until late. It's really late right now in the Ukraine. So the one that gets the one document that we get a lot was the tutorials.
Okay.
We just need to make sure that those are done. By the way, just coming back, I just sent you a little package, a command in there. So Phalcon has this little helper utility, and you might like it. So you just dump this into your composer, and once this thing gets installed, all you have to do is just use the word dd.
Yeah, die dump.
So
I first learned about this one in my Laravel days, and I thought, how clever. But I don't want to install it there. I want to install it.
I actually have my own little debug class, so I have 3-letter or 2-letter functions. So PR is printr, D is die, E is echo, is printr and die, VDD, var dump and die. So are really awesome. The biggest problem that I do have is when you introduce this in a team of developers, they get used to it and they use it a lot. And then all of a sudden, you see code deployed with var dump and die.
Ah, yes, this is a real issue. And this is exactly the reason why you add to your continuous integration platform something that looks for something outside of the normal debug statements.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Because
actually, I have something in one of my repositories, I think.
Like a post commit hook that says did you put die dump in here somewhere?
Yeah, it's on the pre-commit, and yeah. So let me send this to you, and maybe you can share it as well. This is not all my doing. I just this is somebody else. It's Remy Juice Jalama Visiu Jarmala Visius.
We'll try to spell it correctly and put it in the description.
Actually, I thought I had the difficult last name. So pretty much you force all your developers to install this pre-commit hook, on their machines, or you install it on the server or whatever, and that one kills the commit if there is a print R or a die or a bar dump. You can just check the words in the commit.
Yeah, let's see what this thing looks like. Let's see here. Okay, so, oh, I love it. It's less than 100 lines. I can live with this.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's brilliant. I mean, that's exactly what you need.
Yeah.
I would probably figure out a way to make. I'd probably write a module for PHP CS to look for these things and like make a big fuss. But yeah, if you actually are experiencing the issue where this stuff is getting committed, that's a big problem.
Then that's a big problem. And you know, everybody has done it.
Oh yeah, everyone gets to wear the dunce cap at work for breaking the production build once or twice in their career. Maybe more. Maybe you work at GitLab and you destroyed, like all the databases. That's cool too, because your team's just going to pick you up from that, and then you're going to figure out a better tool, and then it's not going to happen again. And that's exactly what this is. Someone did it, broke something. Now we all put a post commit hook in. And we remember fondly that day where everything was a nightmare.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely.
That's my favorite part about working on a development team is that a good development team, no one ever really is in trouble or at fault for anything. It's, well, how did we allow that to happen? Not that this person made the mistake and they will never do it again, kind of thing.
Well, you know what? I do understand that everybody makes a mistake.
Mm-hmm.
Lord knows I've made tons of them, and I'll probably make even more. But when you do the same mistake twice, that means that you haven't learned anything from the first time that you did it. So,
of course.
Using some sort of an automation that would warn you that you're getting ready to make a mistake, then that's a great course of action. And this is a very good segue into why people need to write tests.
Yes.
Because this application is just 1, 2, 3 files, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
The more this thing evolves, this application, let's assume that this is going to become a full calendar, dealing with millions of data. Build this, the more your application will start depending, the components will start becoming dependencies on different other components. You might have all the good intentions in the world of changing something here, but you don't realize, because time has passed and you forgot, even if you wrote the thing, that's somewhere else. So writing tests and going through the test-driven development is definitely something that shields you from those mistakes. And there's something that my coach, when I was doing the Scrum Developer, told me, is that the test that you found is one less. The bug that you found due to your tests, bug that the client saw.
Oh,
so
yeah.
You're building up yourself. It's so true that you have to as the best product ever.
Well, this is kind of where I'm going with having, because the next step I'm going to move on towards is, so now I actually do know how to get something out of my database. I do know how to actually, I do know that my data is being read. I know I can write to the database. Mm-hmm. All those things are super critical. I'm going to worry about what a session is. And this is a good time to start worrying about testing, because being able to log into my application is going to be the first thing that the average user sees, whether they're new or old. And so once this piece is in place, this is usually the time where I start saying I need to test this piece at least, because if this doesn't work, then I lose customers. I lose face, if anything, even if it's the free software. They're going to go find somebody else to have their calendar provider.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, go ahead.
and with the testing suites that exist right now, you can do things so easily. They give you a lot of functionality and a lot of a great suite of tools that you can pretty much read the code, and it's as if you're reading your steps, what you're doing.
So which framework are you talking about in
talking
specific
more-
there?
In particular, the one that I'm thinking of is Codeception.
Yes.
It's a great framework, and I'm completely biased towards it. I'm not gonna lie.
Me too.
For
That's
two
cool.
reasons. First of all, I really like its syntax. You get introduced to an object called I,
Mm-hmm.
and then that object exposes words. So all you do in your code is you write I, and then the function is called monPage, and then you put slash, so that's your home page. And then you can just say in username equals this, I fill in password equals that, I click OK. So you pretty much, you can read this code and understand it in human words. What are you doing? So that could be your test scenario. So that's the first reason. The second reason is,
And just hang on. So that particular type of behavioral testing, that it almost kind of follows that Gherkin syntax, right? Where you it's full sentences that mean things. Like that's that outer level functional programming step. But Codeception is definitely not limited to that.
And it does support Gherkin if you want to go down that route.
Yeah.
You don't have to use the PHP unit. You can use their CEST format, CEST.
Mm-hmm.
So Codeception, it's great. I mean, it comes with a Phalcon module right off the bat. So within a couple of lines of code, you can just be running and launching your application, whether you want to use PHP browser or WebDriver with Selenium or anything like that.
Now, you told me before why there's a Phalcon module for Codeception. And yes. I think it's a strong reason why Phalcon is a good thing to work in as a result, because it has such a good relationship with these tools.
Absolutely. Yeah. I personally know Michael Bodnarchuk, I think is how you spell his name. We spent a lot of time talking in the past. He's the brains behind Codeception. He started the whole project. It was his little... but also, one of the members of our core team, Sergey Yakovlev, is also a member of the core team in Codeception. So we can get the best of both worlds. We can get a great testing framework that works with Phalcon right off the bat. And we know that we're covered. We don't have to worry about the little intricacies of setting up said suite.
Well, I think it's like this. There's like a relationship going on here. You have a really good, and there's my dog finally. You have such a very good delivery of MVC, and then those same people who care about that also care a lot about the testing side. And so there's just a positive relationship. It's not like you can only use Codeception, of course, if you use Phalcon, or if you use Phalcon, you have to use Codeception. But they're two separate things that have the same utter belief underneath, and that means they work well together because they respect each other. And it's like the perfect nature for open source products that just like say, hey, you got a good implementation, we're going to partner with you, but we're going to not exclude anybody. So I love that, and I was really excited when I heard that because I liked Codeception, right? So I'm also biased towards Codeception, and I think it's absolutely killer. And then to slide that along with the fact that they're already there's a relationship with the Phalcon people, you're just going to get a better product.
Yep, absolutely.
And so I'm excited to set that up, just because I would love to actually use Codeception with a official module. I've always had to hand build this thing, and Codeception is great, but if you're not familiar with it, it's like building anything else. It's a little bit to learn.
Yep. The thing that I've noticed is that the biggest problem with codeception for any new user is setting it up.
Mm-hmm.
Once you set it up, it makes it so easy to write tests. It's not even funny.
I agree.
And I'm saying this as being the worst thing for that. Bear in mind, setting Phalcon, for instance, it's something like 2 lines of code in the YAML file.
Yeah.
Right. And it does have a lot of other modules. So it supports also Laravel, Yi. I don't remember how many other modules. It has a WebDriver that can run Selenium. It has its own PHP browser that launches for functional tests. It also supports
WebKit. It supports WebKit just by itself, so you don't even have to run it with Selenium.
Correct.
It supports Phalcon and not Phalcon, Phantom, which is the JavaScript implementation of that. And you can also do Chrome driver directly.
Yep. And it also has another driver called REST.
Oh.
So you can pretty much API with a different suite. So if for argument's sake, you have your unit test suite and then your acceptance or your integration, your functional, depending on how you've structured your test, you can create a REST or API. You can name your suite the way you want it and use the REST. And then you get a whole new set of functions available to you to actually test just the REST integration responses and requests. And it's beautiful. I mean, I've used it in the past, the REST driver. It works wonders.
And this is actually a thing that's a real benefit to a community. So I came back to PHP much later in my life. And I did it in college and then came back 10 years later. And in healthy communities, people like surround good projects and then contribute to them to make them great. And I feel like that's what's happening with Codeception, and it's kind of breaking the norm of what I see in like the composer community, where it's just like everyone writes their own, 5 people use each package, and and there's no one saying like I didn't bother searching Packagist or Composer first before writing my implementation. Which in that point you'd have written less code, you'd have learned a new thing, you probably made some friends. So I always feel like open source needs to come back, like PHP needs to go visit open source again, right? And be friends with them. And that's definitely happening in Codeception. I think it's definitely happening in Phalcon too. And that's, like, big thumbs up to, I think at this point, the only thing I really care about when I write a language is anyone else doing it. Am I all alone out here?
Well, we do need new projects. We do need new ideas.
Yeah.
I mean, if you think about it, if we didn't have new ideas, then Phalcon would have never existed. Oh well, we got Zen framework, we got Symfony. Laravel was not that big when Phalcon started. Of course, it's big now.
Yeah.
So you have all sorts of frameworks, and everybody thinks Cake, not to forget, or CodeIgniter. So, trying something new doesn't necessarily mean that it's a bad thing. But if you do that in your own free time, that's absolutely great. And great that you're trying to improve on something that is there. But if you're working on a project, it's time crunch, and you're getting paid for this, it makes absolutely no sense to not use Packagist or something that would bring you at least X% of that functionality versus you trying to write it from scratch.
Yeah. So from personal experience, I think that has a lot to do with maturity of the shops that I've seen for PHP development. I think I have seen, and it doesn't mean this is ultimately the truth, but it's 3 to 4 guys. It's a little shop. They do a lot of varied work. Maybe it's a consultancy, maybe it's not. But I mean, like, I always have to remind people, like Facebook is PHP. Not all of it. but definitely some of it, and it's where it started. So, like, of course, good ideas come out, but I always see that the people that I think that are committing these open source offenses, let's call them, are the ones who haven't been appropriately introduced to the concept, so they're just kind of like stumbling around. They're like, "Oh, I made a thing and then I put it on packages," or I don't realize I should look at packages first. Like, no one's guiding them. Mm-hmm. They're used to what's in the plugin for WordPress, what's in the plugin for Drupal. I tweaked it a bit. I didn't vendorize it properly. I didn't use Git, right? Like, I FTP'd all those files. It's almost like the only thing that PHP needs to save itself is just for, like, open source people in general to stop shunning them at conferences. I don't know if you ever go to conferences that aren't PHP oriented, but don't bother telling anyone you're PHP, because people will literally shun you. And I find it funny because I went to Abstractions in Pittsburgh, and I made an intention for my Twitter bot to automatically post where I was at the conference and that I wanted to talk to people about PHP. And just, like, watch people kind of not talk to me about that. I don't know what's so terrible about a language that's really good at making strings, but from arrays, but it's apparently not as cool as Perl, I guess, which doesn't make any sense to me at all. Right? I would never choose Perl, but I'm sure there's lots of people out there that love it.
I know a gentleman that would disagree with you heavily on that, to the point that he will chase you. And he would be running as if your life depends on it, because he's on like 6'8" and close to 300 pounds. He lives with Perl, and that's it.
And everybody has their thing they love.
Exactly. The one thing that I have to say about the PHP community is that it has matured over, especially now with PHP 7. I was extremely pleasantly surprised to see the good work that happened there. Now the language has much more stricter typing if you want it.
Yeah.
Okay, it's not the obligatory and all that stuff. The fact that I fully believe that PHP 7 will start separating the men from the boys, so bad code will start shine in PHP 7. And that will push more people go to better programming practices, perhaps themselves. I mean, I do it. I do refresher course myself, and I've been doing PHP since 2000, and that's 17 years now.
Right.
So there's nothing wrong with learning. Maybe somebody else has a better idea. Try and do this, that, the other. Try and get the maximum performance available from your end server, if you like, the destination, so to speak, of where your code would live, and then that would make your application even better, and you would evolve as a developer, better and better code. And if you're thinking about one thing to remember is DRY, dry.
Oh yeah.
Don't repeat yourself. Is that, and you're halfway there.
So I think that I learned. I came up in the development world and became competent. Let's say I'm competent at this point. A lot of that was because of the help of others, right? Like, someone else was willing to take the moment to tell me I was doing something wrong, or say, hey, go use this. Or in some cases, I just took the opportunity myself to go sit in a room with other people and let them talk to me, talk about the thing, and then go home and try it, struggle with it. And eventually you learn things. That is definitely the thing that if there's anything holding it back, which I think Laravel is doing an excellent job of, is trying to make this into a community where people talk to each other and they're not feeling crummy about things. And that will in its own right inspire people to care and to collaborate. And when people work together, they tend to come up with pretty good ideas. Or someone comes up with at least one good idea and someone else copies it, and then it becomes a standard. That's how Google works, right?
Oh yeah. Absolutely.
that's how I've been told that Google works. Is they just say that that's reality, and then it becomes reality.
A lot of good and a lot of bad things about Google. One thing is for sure, they do have good products, and that's pretty much it.
So are we talking about the same thing when we're relating like Google to Alphabet, for example? Like Google intentionally made this very public separation from the software to all the other silly things they do?
I don't know. I mean, I could never understand this whole thing with Alphabet. I mean, I get it that they want to make sure that they get the most bang for their buck in terms of how they structure their companies. Never understand why they did it in a sense, and now who is separated by whom and what. Anyway, it's their own company. They do whatever they want. So
Yeah. My interpretation was I think it had to do with things like Google Wave and Google Plus. I feel that they were pressured to build those tools, and then it was a business imperative. And I feel like Alphabet was their ability to say like, okay, well the business concern is this, but we do science over here. So stop telling us what to do so it makes money, right? Because maybe we're not doing great at that. That was always my impression, because it seemed like it happened right after that. It's possible. I mean, like, I'm just
so
speculating.
about Wave, man.
Did you
love that
did you
product.
like Wave?
Yeah.
I also loved Wave. That was like the coolest thing that they ever launched. I bought an invite on eBay to get into Wave. That is how excited about Wave I was.
No, I was lucky enough. I didn't buy anything. There was a lady. First of all, there was this guy from either Iceland or something, Rasmus or something like that was his name.
Okay.
The one that was the lead developer with the little beard. And then there was this lady, Pamela. She was very much into Wave. I actually met her, and we talked quite a bit. She came over to show us Wave and discuss downtown in DC. Lo and behold, I'm excited. I'm going to meet up. The day that we're meeting up, Google announces that they're canning Wave. So the poor girl was just sitting there. Well, I didn't know about this, guys. I found out like you did. Yeah, okay. So that was story.
I don't even understand that. That's amazing. That's really an amazing story. I'll never understand why they canceled it. It seemed like they'll run something into the ground before they cancel it. This was out just long enough for me to like start liking it, and then boom, gone.
Yeah. Oh well.
Yeah.
Nothing we can do about it.
Well, you can run it currently in federated mode by yourself. They open sourced it. I'm sure that someone has figured it out.
Oh, there was this big thing going on, Save Google Wave, and there's companies that actually built businesses out of it.
Wow.
I don't know how well they're doing, but I knew of 3 relatively big companies that were actually offering these kind of services. The things that this lady told us is that they learned a lot algorithm that was produced with Wave, because it's all a matter of messaging, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I type something, you have to be notified. But what if we're collaborating on a document, and while I'm editing something, you've edited something else, and you overlap mine, and so on and so forth. And the algorithm was smart enough to know that it being taken out and send only the changes that would make the document identical, messages that are existing. So what she said is that the particular implementation of the algorithm was moved over to Google Docs.
Yes, it's the five-way operational handshake, I think is the technical term for that.
So that's at least they got something. But yeah, bummer for Wave.
Yeah, in fact, when Wave went away, they actually like white papered that process, which is the reason why everything that does collaborative document stuff actually works now. There are a couple of JavaScript libraries that just implement that feature, and you can just stick it in your app and have that five-way handshake.
Nice.
That was you're right. You're right. Like we did get the birth of the best part of that as a long-term win for all of us. So while you've been talking, I don't know if you've been watching, but I'm trying to get the login form set up, and I'm taking a little bit in from what you said before, is that you would handle some redirects inside of your controller actions sometimes, or forwarding, for example. So I was thinking the way that might work is you come to the index controller, and I check before you get here, either in that index function or maybe there's a before handler that's available that'll wrap all these actions. Maybe that's just the initializer, possibly, the constructor. So
it's an event called before execute route.
Okay. So my thought is I'll check to see if the person's logged in somehow using this auth library that I've hijacked, which has a function called check, which looks like it just compares the cookie to see if there's a session active.
This is your login. Login. There should be another function called get ID or something like that.
Yeah, I commented some of this out. I kept most of it. Well, I got rid of create remember me environment.
Excuse me.
Save successful login, register user throttling. Because most of this stuff is sitting on top of the security module.
Yeah, the security component.
Right.
What you can do is there must be something called either get ID or get user.
There's a get identity.
Get identity. There you go.
Yeah.
All right. So what you could do is could create a function that would be something like is logged in.
Right.
And then pick up the identity, just like where your mouse pointer is with a get name, something similar.
Yeah.
Try and get the ID, and then you're gonna check if the ID is greater than 0. If it's numeric and greater than 0, and that means that you are logged in.
So get identity should return to me the
whole array
that represents that user.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you look at the check method,
yeah,
you're gonna see what the auth identity contains, line 50 to 54. We're storing the ID, the name, and then the name of the profile.
So
I was thinking that.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Sorry. So if you make something like is logged in and you get the identity and then check if your ID is greater than 0, which you're pretty much getting it from the session.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm logged in or I'm not. And from then on, you can use the auth dot is logged in without even worrying about it.
So one of the things what I'm used to is I usually have in my base controller, which I don't have in this application. I've skipped that step. I would have something called like current user, and then I would probably register that as a helper, so I'd end up using it in most of my views as well. And current user would get me so I'd have an authentication, like a is logged in function, then I'd have a current user function.
Okay.
Yeah, because I definitely would.
You can do that easily. If you create a base controller right now,
let's just do it.
And inherits from it, then we can use the before execute route event, and then in there we can just say if is logged in, then whatever.
Oop, come here. Guess I don't need you anymore. And you're in the same namespace, so I shouldn't need to include you either. Alright, so I got base controller. And
all right. And in here you can use the initialize method, but the one that that you need is before execute route. In the initialize method, what you can do is define your template, what your template would be.
oh, okay, so I'm not going to worry about that just yet.
Yeah, for now, you're good. So you could say my default template would be the public one, but if I'm logged in, I'm setting my default template or my layout, if you like, the private one, which would be different stuff for people that are logged in. So let's create a second function called before execute route. Yep.
And this, we're just overriding the function that already exists in the controller.
No, that thing doesn't exist anymore.
Oh.
It doesn't exist yet, and you need a function.
The word function. Yeah. That's why it's not green.
This is an event that that Phalcon will fire if it exists.
Okay.
In your controller, and of course you can have this function inside all of them. You might want to do a before execute route on the index, or not do it in the session. It's up to you how you do it.
I just have to make sure I call super at the before I execute the rest of my routes to maintain the dependency chain.
Yeah. So in here, all you have to do is just look in your auth class, and pretty much say, okay, well, am I logged in or not? And what you were talking about earlier about your current user, you can have a protected variable in there that will keep the current user.
So I'm going to need to create a new auth object.
Well, do you really?
I don't know, actually. I haven't really...
get it from your DI container.
Oh, that's right. This is a service. I forgot that I don't... That's what happens when you build an application over 3 weeks. Alright. I don't need that. It's just this auth.
Well, hold on a sec. What you just saw was the actual auth class extends component, so it has access itself to the DI container. Have you registered it in the DI container? That's the big question, which seems that you have not.
Thought I did, actually. But maybe I never got around to that part. I just copied the class in, reviewed it, but let's go ahead and do
Pretty
that.
much what we did with the filter. That's the same thing.
App auth.
Yep.
And we'll put it up here above security. Below security.
And you can do that. Return new auth. And that's pretty much it.
Well, I always...
So now you can access your controller.
Yes, now I can access it as auth in my controller. And I really love the dependency container in here.
It's really cool.
It's my favorite. Alright. So this auth is logged in. And if there's anything else, I'd put a question mark on it. Now, is logged in is just going to check that if I have a cookie.
Yeah, this one checks the current session if you're there, and you can assign that to a variable of sorts inside your. You can have a protected variable that all controllers can access.
Right.
Inside this one, you can also have another variable for your current user that you mentioned earlier.
Yep.
You can just put false.
That's a good idea. I like that.
And that one would be null.
To avoid the null, I would actually say current user would be new user, probably. Then at least I always get an empty user back that my interface will work.
No, you're probably never gonna get. Well, here's the thing: if you do new user,
yeah,
right, you're gonna have an object that you will be able to save it.
Oh, that's right.
So you could easily go through the route of your application, and a slight mistake, you're starting to save users and users in your database, or getting errors. What would the current user be? That's the big question. Is it a collection of some information from the user, or is it the user object?
So is there a concept of frozen or immutable objects in PHP?
No, but you can fake it.
So that's what I'd probably go with. So if this was Ruby, I would get that object and then I would freeze the object. Which, aside from reassigning arrays and things, I would be kind of blocked. So I guess I can't constant an object.
No, you can't. What you could do though with this is you could actually get a user complete object. And what do I mean by that? So we have our users table, right?
Yeah.
If we do a find first and we want the ID equals 2, we're going to get the full object back.
Yes.
And with that object, we can do updates, we can do deletes, we can do inserts,
Which I don't want to do. Yeah, I don't want to do that.
So that's the normal operation. However, if you actually specify on specific columns from that object, so let's say you get all the columns apart from one, then you cannot touch that. You cannot save it.
Right.
Because it's not a complete object.
But it's still an object.
Yeah, in that case, though, you will have something.
Yeah.
So to speak.
That's interesting. All right, so let's see here.
So grab the get name.
Yeah.
And we can do the same thing that it does there. So is logged in.
Oh, is this going to be as logged in?
Yeah, let's do the is logged in, and then the current user, we can do the...
Okay. All right, so what's the right flow for this?
So we're grabbing the session identity, right?
Yes.
And then what we can do is we can do return identity. Okay, so that would be identity ID. And then delete that semicolon, space, question mark, space 0. And then put all of that in parentheses and put greater than 0.
All right. So what have I done with this code golf?
Okay, so the 2 question marks is something new in PHP 7 for those that don't know it. One of the huge battles that would happen, and then you would hear things such as you're a lazy programmer or you're not a lazy programmer, is people either deliberately or by mistake not checking if an index or a key exists. And as a result, you would get all these warnings in your log, which in some cases they would increase the log significantly. And the easiest way to do it is to suppress the warnings.
Right.
And the notices, which for me is inexcusable, but then again, that's just me. Now, PHP 7 has these 2 question marks, which pretty much do if the $identity ID element is set, then give it to me back. Otherwise, give me 0. So if it checks if the element exists first and then gives it to you back.
So it is literally an index guard.
Yeah, yeah.
So if this is set, all right.
Yeah, if
I'm just writing this out.
And then do something. Otherwise, give me 0.
Right.
Give me if it's set, give me the element back, or 0 if it's not.
We'll just say return for the sake of this.
Yeah, return $identity ID.
I guess I could have written this as ternary. So this is just like a terser ternary that includes isSet as part of its behavior.
Correct. Correct.
I like it. I really think that's gorgeous because I can tell you personally the reason I don't use isSet is because it's ugly as hell.
It's fast as hell, though.
You know, that's an interesting point. I was going to ask you when you were talking about disabling the warning logs or silencing them. The reality is, all those logs do actually decrease overall performance. Like there's standard buffer time that had to happen. So the more times you're generating warnings. But my question was, if you suppress them, are they still being run, or they're just being, we're just not going to bother with that part of the logger?
I think, if memory serves right, I think in 7 they fixed that.
Okay.
And what do I mean by they fixed it? If you have suppressed the logs, let's say I don't want to see warnings, then whenever Zend error is called, it does not create variables to store the error.
Okay.
Now in PHP 5, I know for sure that what it would do is it would actually suppress the output. It would not suppress the creation of the internal variables. So you have an error, a warning that happened in your code. What Zend error would do is it would allocate memory to store the error number, the error description, the stack trace, and all that stuff, all those goodies that you get in the exception. And then in the end, it would go and say, show it now? No, okay, fine. But that code, that piece of memory and those resources are already allocated. I'm pretty sure that in 7 they don't do that anymore. That's why you have a little bit more of that. Now that doesn't mean that you should just throw all the warnings in the world and just get rid of them. And because the problem is that a warning potentially show you where you have an error in the code.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad I asked that question because I had this in my mind that at some point all it did was like pipe standard error to device, device null. We're not really saving anything.
Nice. And well, in 5, no, you were not saving anything.
That's interesting.
Really. So, yeah, that one should work. And if it's greater than 0, it's going to return true. Otherwise, it's going to return false.
Right.
Pretty much a one-liner there.
And then as far as getting the user.
The get user, okay. So this is your check.
That's me comparing them to see if they can log in. This sets the authentity that they have been logged in. We were looking at to see if they're logged in. Right. Okay. So right now we're not even dealing with cookies. We're literally just in memory sessions.
Yep.
Okay.
So auth user by ID, you got something down there. You go scroll down.
Yeah, this one. So we pass the ID in, and that will then see if that user exists. So I think auth user by ID is being called by check, probably. No?
No, I don't think so.
Interesting.
It could have been that this was Paul copying and pasting code.
Oh, this is definitely copy pasta. All I did was eliminate code that I took the original file and then eliminated all code that branched into something that would generate an error. So,
gotcha.
Like for example, there was an overwritten exception class, and it had no body. It was just like a copy, and so I just rewrote it. I think get user is actually what I want though. This
Yeah,
will...
get user is definitely what you need.
So, I'm just going to keep it as get user. What the heck?
And since you're going to be logged in, it will know that the identity ID is there. So
you're saying it's unnecessary to use this is set because we've wrapped it?
no, what I was getting at. You can call this, and you already have logged out. What you could do is, instead of having identity equals this session get auth identity, just line 303, just put ID equals this. Actually, no, we have get logged in. So are we going to check if the user is logged in?
So my thought is, this is just something that's going to be made available in the view, which it is now because it's a service. So because we registered in a DI container, I should be able to say this.auth in any of my views and have access to the get user function, which I care about. No, in reality, that's actually all I wanted, an amazingly simple way of getting access to that. All I really need to do now in the base controller is just ask, is the user logged in? If they are, I want to direct them to, I want to let them continue on basically to the index route. And if they're not, I want to redirect them to the session controller. Or forward them might be the appropriate behavior so they don't ever actually see this route. They just end up in the right place. So that's kind of my thought here, is that this is just doing that initial, like, if they're not logged in, go send them over to session. Otherwise, I assume that if you just return true at the end of this, it continues on.
It should continue on, but right there where you're at 19, you can do return this. You're gonna have to check if is logged in, right?
Yes.
If not, is logged in.
Yeah, all I have right now is just this variable.
Okay, so if we're not logged in.
Yeah, because if we are logged in, I don't care. Just bypass. It's only if we're not.
Then we're going to have to use the dispatcher to forward.
Which is cool, because I think I set up the dispatcher.
I think we did it the last time around.
Yep. But I haven't used the dispatcher yet.
How can you do this?
Phalcon dispatcher. See, the documentation's so good that you've been working on that 90% of the time, the first document that comes up is literally the Phalcon documentation and not Stack Overflow. You know when you're winning when the first result is your actual documentation. That means people are clicking on it. So I think that I'll just follow this pattern, which looks really, really easy, and probably there's a shorthand for it, but I don't care. All right, so it looks something like this. I can set the controller name to... No, I don't want to use this.
No, you don't even need to do that. You can do it the even easier way. So
I knew that. I knew it.
Line 20, just put a new line down there, and then do this dispatcher.
Oh, come on,
above that anyway.
Yeah.
There you go. So this dispatcher forward.
Forward.
And then you just open the parentheses, and inside that you're gonna have an array. And the first key is controller. And the value would be whatever you want. And the second one would be action. And that's pretty much it.
Nope. Yeah, it would be index. That's right. I have this set up for index. So same thing as we have here, just nice, but not wasting time on running functions.
One less line, yeah. So you can get rid of the controller dispatcher dispatch.
Because forward already with dispatch.
This is not a return. It would actually get you to that, and it will break the execution right there.
So it's not going to continue to any other part of the before execution route, before execute route if this is called?
I believe so. Now,
Okay.
here's the question. When it, you might end up with the endless loop here.
Exactly what I thought.
So there has to be a way to allow it to run without it. And the way to allow it to run without it is if your session controller does not inherit from the base.
I mean, or I just override it and not bother calling.
Could do that. Sure.
I would probably say that there should be like an exclude execute route or exclude from before or something. It could be a helper function or who cares. But yes, it can either not extend the base controller or just override it.
You can put an NFR. We can build it at some point.
What's NFR?
A new feature request.
Oh yeah. So no, that absolutely right. Absolutely right. And that's usually I spend a lot of time working in this and then going like, oh, I can write a PR for
that. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so we're over here. We go to login. We should be able to complete this. I haven't tried this yet. Let's see. So I just did load the login form. In this case, I copied the logic exactly. I noticed we had a try block in here, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, because you really want to... And here's the thing. It says catch auth exception. You don't necessarily need to have the auth exception. It was created so that you can distinguish exceptions, and that one can easily be your base exception. You don't necessarily need the try.
Yeah, I always avoid tries when possible. I was trying to figure out what part of this would actually have raised an exception. Maybe the has remember me probably throws an exception. I think some of these parts actually throw exceptions is the reason. Yeah. So let's get rid of just about everything. But I'm going to start following this pattern of checking if the request is a post before doing anything, just because that seems idiomatic. All right, so I need to pass these credentials from this object into check. I need to verify my form too. So I did.
I wouldn't do that.
No?
Well, first of all, you do have to do the if is valid.
Yeah, that's the part that's where I'm getting confused with. Is I'm confusing this step with the is valid.
Okay. So if in that case, you'll probably do if it's not valid.
Right.
If it's not false.
If this is a post.
All right. So if this is post and then this is valid. Right?
Yeah.
Now,
which is
just to create a small array called credentials, and then 2 elements on that. One is user, and the other one is pass, or something.
Sure.
And then okay. So what are your elements called in your form?
This should be email and password. I think it's email.
Password.
Yeah. My login form, I'm doing email and password.
Okay. Okay. So in your session, you're gonna do this request.
No,
get post. And then that one will require the inside the get post.
Oh, okay.
You will email for this, and then comma. You can do an array in there with strip tags, with string. That's your filter.
Yeah, can I do a Phalcon like constant?
Yeah, you can do an array with multiple constants, or you can just do one constant.
That's right. I remember this. I was reading about this. I thought that was pretty clever. Yeah, because I did that down here with email and strip tags.
Yeah. So in that case, it will be Phalcon/filter : and in capitals filter _
I can do strip tags.
Yeah, or you can do email.
Oh, email would do that by itself, right?
Yeah.
So
and then what you could also do is put comma and then put an empty string.
So it provides a default option as well.
That would be, yeah, that would be the default option. The same thing for password. Password, you can just leave it as is.
Yeah.
Or just put something else. I don't know. Sometimes strip tags will actually get valid characters that you have allowed. Yeah, string would be fine. Strip tag, yeah.
Strip tags, I think, is the most likely to not be invasive.
Mm-hmm. Need a minor correction on the filter. That line.
Oh, yeah.
This is your credentials array.
Yep.
And then all you have to do is just pass that into your auth check. And you can store that variable because that one will return either a true or false, and then from that on you move on.
So check returns nothing.
Doesn't do anything. You could return something.
Right now. I could return something. Let's see. Do I know if? So it's because it throws an exception in the event.
There's the exception.
Yeah. So we're gonna do. This checks the password. This checks if the user exists. I'm not gonna.
Yeah. Return false.
Well, I guess I can early return here.
False.
Yeah.
Well, here's the thing: return false, and then in the message that you will display, you can just say invalid username password combination. This way, you don't tell them whether the user was found or the password was wrong.
And that's exactly you caught it. That's exactly what I was thinking. Like, do I want to make the decision? Well, am I telling anybody about it? No. And in this case, it would just return true.
Yeah, return true.
I like that. And since I know I don't need this stuff anymore right now. That is a lovely little function. All right. What was I doing over here?
So you're good
That's
there.
fine. Yep. I'm just cleaning up now. All right. So I checked. So this is where. Well, let's get return true or false. So I'm going to say like logged in, and that's if form is valid. I'm not going to return the form. I'm probably going to
have to put the form there. Keep the form there. Yep.
So just so I can make sure I'm thinking about this right. So I started at index possibly. I was forwarded to this. So as far as the server is concerned, I've changed locations. But as far as the browser is concerned, I'm still at index.
Correct.
Now I'll get a response body from whatever action then ends up resolving the request. So I don't necessarily care that this is going to return this form, and it's going to return the appropriate view for it, which will probably need to be set, I think. Okay.
Yeah, the session login. So in your line 28, then below that, we just need to check if you're logged in, of sending up a couple of messages to the Flash session. So if logged in, then just the this response redirect. Oh, you want to put the message first?
Well, I guess it doesn't have to be done in that order. I'm used to when I make the redirect action, it does a forward. This is just setting up that the response will have a redirect.
Yeah, just slash, nothing else. because you need to go back to the index.
Right.
And you could put before that this flash session. And then what do we want? Let's put another little arrow and then success. Welcome new user.
Yep.
Well, welcome new user, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can play around with that.
Yeah, whatever. That's fine. That's fine. That we can test it at least is the point.
Yeah, and then if you copy line 30, we can branch off. So how are we going to do this without any pain or something?
So the person's not logged in. My first gut reaction would be to redirect them back to or re-forward them to the session index.
Oh yeah. That's by all means that's going to happen.
Okay.
I'm thinking of all the nested ifs.
Yes.
So I was thinking, let's put at the top where form is, logged in equals false. All right. So that's my success message, and then I would say in line 36. Not logged in, then invalid username and password combination. Or no, actually that wouldn't work because it would always bring that out.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this has to be set as far as the else of the logged in.
Yeah, that works.
This is the reason why my initial gut reaction was to not include this. This seems like a wasted set of nesting. But the reality is if you were defining the route, then you could define the route to only accept post, and then you wouldn't have to do this check. So this is like you lose a bit of fancy functionality for something that's simpler, and you make a balancing act, right? Although I could do this instead. I could do something, and I probably actually, this is fine. And I would, then I would just have to forward. Or I would just throw an exception. I would just go back somewhere else.
No, well, you don't really have to, because you have to do a get either way to show the format its initial state, and then when the user types in their credentials and clicks on the button, then you will get to the post. This is the self-posting form.
Well, yes,
so
but
the first time you load this, it will be a get.
Oh no, it's not a self-posting form. I redirect you to the session index. Session index form posts you to the login. If I had named it right. I named the wrong one.
Okay. And then I got it wrong.
Well, what you're saying is something that's totally normal PHP stuff, the self-posting form thing, and it's something that I'm rebelling against. I need to stop.
Yeah,
is kind of the point. Like
if you rebel, you don't have to do anything. All you have to do is just even enclose the line 20. This request is post, and just engulf the whole thing into a post. Without even the is logged in or the form, nothing. So don't even bother doing anything. Yep. And then
no, all I was going to do is instead just invert that logic and do an early return. in the event that it wasn't the right behavior. But this is fine. Like, there's nothing wrong with this. And I do need to start taking advantage of the self-posting. It's one of the things that's different between this automatic routing and the Rails very defined routing, is that I can't accept both the post and the get action within the same action. I guess I could, but that would be considered like an enormous violation of good form, you know. And then the neckbeards would come out, and then they would sprinkle you with whiskey for not being authentic hipster enough, you know. And I feel safe saying these things because I've done Rails for 6 years. Right? I am one of those people.
Yep. So one of the things that we can see here, since the login action is going to be posting just to check the post.
Yeah.
First of all, line 38, you don't really need it because there's no view. There's going to be no view on this.
Yes. And that's
Okay.
that's what I was thinking before. Except when this fails and this generates the response, I would want to send this to. I would want this to render the index view, or I need to redirect it back to the index in that case.
Okay. In that case, line 32.
Yeah.
Just send it. Copy it a little bit further down. You are going to be redirected to the route, the root of the application either way.
I see.
With a correct or incorrect message.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And I would even put it
inside of.
Put it inside the if request get. Yeah, because if it is a get, you don't really care. You don't want to play around with it anymore.
It's really interesting, this idea, to me. Like, you've made an obvious request to a action that I am not interested in dealing with, and so my solution is just not do anything. Just let it happen and walk away.
Mm-hmm.
I find that very interesting. Although, realistically, if you're not logged in and you try to get the login action, you'll be redirected to the index of the session, which will then ask you to log in. So theoretically, I could actually take advantage of this because of the way it's routing. I do like this forwarding dispatch thing. I think that's pretty neat. I kind of wish I could put that in the Rails, because you really have render or redirect, and that's it. That's all you get.
Well, the dispatcher is really good, and it's extremely powerful, especially when you start putting events on it.
Yeah.
You could potentially have a lot of things going on. One of the most common approaches of using the dispatcher is to find if you have a 404. The dispatcher will throw an exception, and then you can check the code that came out with the exception. Sorry, and based on the codes that you get, you can just forward them into a 404 action or error controller or whatever.
Right.
It's not the only thing that's not the only event that the dispatcher has. Now, people get these things mixed up. The dispatcher is the only one that can forward, and if you want to redirect, you have to do it in the request.
Yeah. Well, it makes sense.
The response.
Because the browser is what takes care of redirects in the end.
Sorry. Yep, pretty much.
I have screwed up index.php again. Yep, semicolons. They're important.
It helps.
Not just for your grandma. Ah, real error. Something else wrong. That looks okay. It says app auth not found. Of course, right.
All right.
So, is this probably a little bit of chicken before the egg kind of situation? So, that namespace app auth doesn't get set up until this file runs, which means it wouldn't know where to get this from. because my thing. So how am I just have to require this file, I guess?
No. The loader, the register namespace should have picked it up. It's just an array.
No, but I tried to use it, but then I tried to.
I get it, but
oh,
there you're using it down.
Okay.
Where it's set. It's kind of like the shortcut.
Yeah.
The alias, if you like. So
Okay.
App off, then you're gonna do. I mean, if you want to test it.
No.
All the way at the bottom where it says, and just put app/off.
No, it makes sense because it's calling the error on line 50 and not on line 6. If there's a problem on line 6, it would say it's that. It's saying that this app auth not found. Period.
Can you open the app auth?
Yeah.
The auth off, whatever.
Yeah.
Double look. App auth. Well, it's app auth off. It's not app off. It's two auths.
Oh, right. Yes, I've done a silly thing.
Yeah.
I had big designs for this package, that's why.
There you go.
Yoda, relax.
Yoda? Oh my lord.
I have 3 dogs. I have Yoda, Cosmo, and Yoshi.
Nice.
And they're all... Well, they've been pretty good today, so... They're sitting there going like, why are you still on the computer? Alright, so let's see. I have an email address. Just gonna see if we can log in. How exciting is that? And that means that next time is all about setting up Codeception. Alright, I don't remember what my password is. But I think it's the kind of combination an idiot has in his luggage.
Yeah, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
I've got another error. But it's a new error. Oh, okay, just bring me up the error, computer. Okay, let's see here. Uncaught error class Phalcon. Well, that would be why, because I didn't spell Falcon right. And that would be on line 27 of session controller. Phalcon.
Yeah, that would not work that well.
This is usually where I start saying that, like, it gets to this time when I'm streaming and I just start yelling at the internet, like, where were you at internet? Why didn't you tell me it was broken?
Sometimes you get to the point that you're too tired and then you just cannot see the obvious in front of you.
Line 27 of auth. Okay, so...
Find first by email.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's change that to that that format with the conditions. It's gonna be much easier for you to figure that out. I don't know.
Yeah, but I'm trying to figure out what the actual error really is on line 27. Because it's not. It's just. I didn't know if it was a parse error.
Let's go back to the controller.
It is uncaught. Oh, it's models users. It's the fact that my users aren't. It's probably because I named it something else. It's.
Back to the controller for a second.
Yeah.
All right. You see where the problem is? Line 26. We set it as user, and in the other end, we're looking for email. 26.
Yeah.
Either change that to user or change the other one to email.
Well, that's actually not that is wrong, but that is not the exception I'm getting. The exception I'm getting is dealing with the fact that it doesn't know what the heck this is. Models users. So
shouldn't that be
I think it's just users. Because the way that the loader is that should just be in the global name, like the root namespace.
Do you have a user's namespace at all?
Well, it's namespaced through. It's not namespaced. No, I shouldn't
Okay,
have
well,
it namespaced. It's just be a model.
okay, so if it's not namespace, then you don't need the models users. You just need users. That's
Right.
it.
And then I will change this over
yeah.
here to say email. 2 problems in one go. I love it. Fixing all the things.
Pair programming, man. That's the way to go.
Do you get to pair program a lot?
Not as much as I would have liked to, but yeah, we do get quite a bit of pair programming.
All right. Uncaught exception auth. Oh, all right. I'll do it. I get it. You're in a namespace. The other thing isn't. You get a slash. You get a slash. Everybody gets a slash. All right. So I guess I could have just said use users. No, I don't think that works that way.
You could have.
Okay. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Oh no, everyone knows my password now. Undefined index password, and that's because we called it pass.
Passed. Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna change. No, I'll change this one. It's the ultimate conundrum. Do I want my arrows to line up, or do I want my strings to be meaningful? I will take both. Thank you. All right, access to undefined property user's profile. So that's probably just more copy pasta.
Fine. Yeah, it was the copy pasta that we have in the session in the auth object, that profile, user profile name. In the Vokuro, there is a profile table, and there's the relationship.
That's right.
So you can get rid of that.
Yep.
There.
Perfect.
Good to go.
Hey, as a bonus note, it's actually redirected me back to the index.
Nice.
Yeah, I don't know if my password was right, so I'm going to try to type my password in wrong this time. Well, this time my password will be wrong. And now I don't have any way of logging out.
Yeah, well, clear cookies then, I guess.
I think I left behind a remove. Yeah, so there's a remove function, and I think I put a logout. Yep, there's a logout action. I did think about this.
Okay.
This was an eventuality I was expecting. Something to work, you know, go figure. All right. Oh, that's interesting. So what it did is it redirected me to an empty page that said welcome user. So it finished this action because I didn't return. It flash sessioned on an empty page, said welcome user, and then redirected.
Oh, nice. Okay.
So I can solve this problem. That actually won't solve the problem, will it? Because when it returns, it'll still go and run another page. So I almost want to just forward at this point. I'm probably going to start, misusing this forward thing a lot.
And then you're going to get to the forward hell where you don't know where you're going to stop.
And then I'm going to say to you, listen, there's this thing called a routes file. We're just going to use that. Okay. So I'm not going to use the forward, although that would be cute. I would like to... Is there a concept of a conversation, like delaying a flash over some period Is it Flash versus Flash now?
No.
Okay. All right, so I want to just
Yeah.
directly redirect and not render this page.
What page don't you want to render?
Ah, okay, so
Again, I missed that.
yeah, what's happening is I do the login, we're successful. I say is logged in.
Okay.
This Flash session message gets stored. This sets the redirect, which momentarily, because the redirect is part of the response, displays an empty page for login, which is session login. It's got no content, but the layout for the includes the Flash output. So right before it redirects, it says welcome user. Because technically the first response has to be delivered before the redirect can happen.
Okay, flip over there. Just put return this response redirect.
See, I was going to do that, and I said to myself, but won't return end up just getting me to the same spot?
With the responses, you can return them.
Okay.
With the dispatcher / forwards, you can't.
Okay. Yeah, let's see that.
Makes sense.
Let's see that happen again. Then. Session log
Right.
out. That's an interesting problem to have hit. No, it still did the same thing. So we still get an interstitial. It literally is. So in order for the redirect to happen, the redirect is a response. But this Flash session is being delivered with the redirect response. So it's momentary, but it's before the browser is able to transition. I think the only way around this is I have to split these. So like, if it's invalid, then I should redirect. But that means that the Flash message for the error is not going to show up on the form. I'm going to have to just render views. I'm going to have to render the index action so that
Correct.
and
show.
And that wouldn't be a problem. So I've introduced this problem by not allowing this action to accept both the get and the post.
Gotcha.
So this is definitely like one of those points where I'm creating more work because I want to have separate get and post actions. I mean, I just have to be able to know how to take advantage of that appropriately. Like maybe this login action would have been better served self-resolving. I personally have seen this done in Laravel as well, even though Laravel does routes, like has an explicit routing kind of like mentality like Rails. But what I'll see is they'll put an if post and then if get section in their action, and part of me inside dies when I see that. Because now I definitely can tell you that function does more than one operation, right? That is, we are not following a solid mentality in any way. Like there's no single responsibility principle at all, and but I mean it depends on if the responsibility of the function is to deliver a template or not, right? That's an argument one could have. I know what I'd end up doing is I know I'd end up writing two functions that are private and then calling those two functions inside the blocks for the is post is get, so that I could have some kind of like visual segmentation. But anyways, this is a solvable issue. What's that?
So other things that you can do, you can create some sort of a mechanism where execute routes is the one that does everything for you. So I'll give you an example and see whether your imagination goes towards that end.
Okay.
So in have self-posting forms, right? Fine.
Yeah.
But at some point, as your application grows, you will definitely make use of JavaScript and Ajax in order to provide a better user experience.
Yes.
For your users instead of, you know, all these endless posts and refresh and all that stuff. Well, the issue with Ajax is you have to ensure that when you get the request, it's a valid Ajax request. All right, it's not somebody bombarding it with gets and all that stuff.
Yes.
And the second one is when you return the response, you have to have the correct content type, which is application JSON.
Right.
What you can do is you can actually use a different name for your actions. So, for instance, you could use Ajax login action, right?
Yeah.
But you have to suffix it with Ajax.
Yeah, actually, I think that's
sorry with action, right?
Yeah.
So, in that case, what you can do is in the before execute route, you can actually look at what this thing, what method has been called, and for the login post action, you can do a check if this request is post. Yeah, great, just let it go. Otherwise, you know, let it go. I've watched too many times Frozen. And then you can stop it right there before it even hits this controller.
So what's the cost of that introspection?
Pretty much you're introducing some kind of like hacked way of middleware.
Yes.
Where you're stopping everything before it gets to your controller. Because the base controller will execute first, buys the dispatcher to either forward somewhere or stop it. That's where the event sits. Done this before, it worked wonders because we were utilizing the before execute route and after execute route. And in the before, we were checking if this is an Ajax. And on the after, we were forcing, if it was an Ajax, of course, we were forcing the context to application JSON. So we wouldn't really even care inside our controllers to set that context. So we always knew that if our endpoint had Ajax in it, end up with Ajax with JSON.
I think that there's a certain, like, at a point of a certain scale that would definitely, it would work great. But is there not? I think what I think I want to see, I think where my brain has gone with this is that I kind of want to see like an initialize for a controller for me to define special cases for certain actions. So like I can say, and it would, because I kind of have fallen in love with this idea that really my actions, my routes are defined by a normalized naming convention of my module controller and then method, and I love that because then I'm seeing what the route is right there at the route. But I could see like an override where I say like login, you know, and then give it an array, and I can say what method, what verb it accepts, what verbs it accepts, and what its what its header configurations might be. So I could say what its response header, and I could say that it accepts JSON. I could see that being pretty cool, and that's something that then can be built as a something that just can be injected, and then I can add it into the controllers that I need it in. It's really clever.
There is something like that, but
yeah,
there is something like that, but not to the level that you're talking about. If for micro applications, you can mount routes according to their HTTP verbs.
Yeah, I'm definitely going further because I want to be able to do the same thing. Like I can, in Rails, for example, I can say a route only responds to JSON, for example, which means the accepts header has to be passed, otherwise that route won't fire. And don't get me wrong, it would definitely do a lot of this before execution route registration.
Yes.
And so I'd do that configuration, then I'd have to call the helper inside of before execute route. But I mean, like, that's no big deal. And I like that because, you know, the more I spend time outside of like simple interpreted languages like Ruby, and I go back towards, you know, like AMD and JavaScript, and then more Java, where they're using Spring and it's all solid and it's all dependency injected. I love the idea of loose composition, where I just like make a thing that gets instantiated when I need it, and then make it do special stuff on the request. Yeah, so I think I'm probably gonna poke around at maybe something like that for my own neuroses. I need to know things.
There's a lot of great ideas going on. Not only just what you mentioned, but we've seen it in the forum and in other discussions with contributors, even people that just want to ask questions. Definitely we want to move Phalcon towards the direction where a lot of the difficult tasks are handled by the framework, but not necessarily obligatory that you have to do it that way.
No, that's really cool. It's really cool, and that's yeah. I think someone might have come home. Well, let's slow down and maybe call this a day then. And so I know that one of the things you've mentioned to me in the past is that you want to do like more community type meetings, for example.
Sure. Yep.
So that's something I think that's fun. I think that in the end, most of this conversation, it's like the first hour of it wasn't really a lot of working on this application. It was more or less kind of like a history lesson, a lot of nice, very interesting background stuff, just about yourself, about the framework, about like what the goals are. And I think that a lot of people could take a lot away from that, understanding what the let's say the stakeholders, what their goals are. That really helps people line up. You know, it helps them align with what the project is trying to do, and gives them more. I think it gives people inspiration. I think that's why people like going to conferences. So, I hope that continues. I hope that my personal hope was that you guys would get a podcast together of some sort, kind of like the Laravel guys do. I just think that would be pretty cool.
Yep. Some moons ago, many moons ago, actually, I tried to do that, but then I think it was just work, then baby number 3, and all that stuff that comes in life.
Well, it's because you got to have someone else besides you doing it. It's the same thing I always have a problem with meetups. Like I have to find the next person. You know.
Yeah, we did of Hangouts, and it's posted on our YouTube page. Believe it or not, we do have one of those.
Well, yeah, I know. I've seen it. Let's go there now.
I mean, it would be great if we actually have some sort of community Hangouts where people can just hang out, just talk about it, have ideas. I mean, and even this is great because you just ideas, one thing leads to another, and then another suggestion comes up, and what if you do this? And these could very well be questions that a developer that just realized what Phalcon to them and wants to just try it out for the hell of it might have these questions, and instead of just going through a lot of documentation, just have the same questions answered here.
Oh, I agree, and that's kind of my thought in doing this. And I was just going to struggle through on my own, but you know, you've been pretty much holding my hand the whole time, which has been really awesome because then I get actual responses to those arbitrary what-if questions that, you know, are because I don't want to read the documentation. As good as it is.
Yeah.
Well, so I see that. So this is the Phalcon framework one, like YouTube channel that I have up on YouTube, like so for the live stream. I think it's like a green logo, the fastest PHP framework.
Actually, we need to rename that the fastest full stack. but
Yeah.
it's not the fastest framework. I think YAF is the fastest one,
Okay.
but it has nowhere near the functionality that Phalcon offers.
Oh, sure.
So if we want to be, correct, it's not the fastest. It is the fastest full stack. So, where am I? My channel. Yeah, so
Oops.
this. I thought I created a vanity URL, but it appears that I haven't.
Listen, YouTube's really nightmarish about this stuff. Like, it's hard. For all I know, I'm only looking at a playlist, or I'm looking at the wrong channel. I mean, like, it's
This
hard.
is the channel, actually.
Let's see here. So there's apparently another channel that's the PHP the Phalcon PHP community, and then there's a Phalcon PHP framework channel.
Okay. Well.
Yeah, that's my point. Now, what I was going to segment to here is that I like the idea of doing community hangouts. I think those are actually really, really accessible. And one of the things that I know works really well is even Google Calendar now will, if you make a calendar event, it automatically creates a Google Hangout like ahead of time and shares the URL. So that might be a good way of like getting people to tack on as if it gets into their calendar somehow.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a thought. Because my problem is always trying to get people to remember that things are happening. Which is probably the only reason I ever pay Meetup. Because I really am not a huge fan. But they do a lot of marketing for my groups. And they'll send out email reminders telling people to show up.
All right. Well, let's do it. Let's get more people in.
Yeah, we can talk about it a little bit more offline. I just was kind of curious as to. I feel I get the you've told me this before. You're like the primary guy in North America worried about the kind of the community outreach part. I know that you're not solely responsible for that, but I mean, like, that's kind of a role that you've assumed, and that's got to be daunting, you know. So big respect is all I'm saying. Like, huge respect for taking on that kind of work. I think you're doing a great job of it, and I think so. Thank you. And
sure.
And again, I appreciate you showing up and sitting online with me for a couple of hours. And then probably a bit more before we started streaming. So that was pretty cool. I appreciate it. I'm going to let you go because I know you got a family and stuff. And I'm going to go see my family too. So, but have yourself a lovely evening.
You too, sir. And we'll talk offline about the rest of the schedule, how we're going to do it. Probably do a couple of blog posts announcing it to the community, see what kind of feedback we get. You know, potentially make this a regular thing so that we can have some more participation. And I just want people to feel that we're not just machines, we're just random guys and just regular guys as well, other than the random one.
So just to take away, there's a famous guy, DHH, right? He's the original guy who wrote Rails, working at Basecamp or whatever. And he's not what I'd consider like a community leader who hides. Like, he just has his own opinions. He doesn't care if anyone likes them, and that's probably actually the thing I like about him. A lot of people criticize him for that, but I actually like that part. Is he's just kind of like, that's him. That's the guy. He's also successful, but he talks to people, and I think that's there's another lady, Sandy Metz, who I've seen at conferences. Another person who does a wonderful job of being both visible and present, and yeah, it helps make it seem more personable. We used to have a saying in the Ruby community that Mats is nice. Mats was the guy who made the Ruby interpreter, Yehuda Mats, same guy who worked on bunch of other awesome stuff that we all use in JavaScript too. But he says Matt's is nice, so we are nice. So I think definitely if you take the opportunity to like put a human face on a project, yeah, it's going to be epic. Well, I'll stop digressing. But yeah, talk to you a little later, and
Okay.
it was fun.
All right. Same here.
Bye.
Thank you. All right. Bye.